This week, Freemasonry in the Age of COVID-19. Todd E. Creason goes back to the lodge. An advanced reading of A Love of Learning Can't Be Diminished. A new first-hand experience of one of the Esotericon organizers. How did they overcome having to move from an in-person event to an all-digital event? We look at a new article from Robert E. Jackson. Does social media make us anti-social? Does Freemasonry teach us how to overcome this? Finally, we wrap up with a return to the labyrinth in a piece that explores the grand simplicity of it all. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
All right, welcome back. This is episode number 457 of the Whence Came You podcast. I want to thank everybody out there joining us once again for another packed episode full of Masonic education. I also want to thank all of our producers, our fellows, our contributors to the podcast. Without you, we cannot do this show week after week, month after month, year after year. We've been at this show since July of 2011, and it's all thanks to you. If you want to find out more about how you can assist this podcast in bringing Masonic education, philosophical education, and universal truths to everybody we can, go ahead and head on over to wcypodcast.com, click on Support the Show. There you're going to see a few different ways that you can help support this show. Of course, I mentioned the producer, the fellow, the contributor. Those three tiers are available whether on Patreon or on PayPal, whichever you choose. They have the same benefits. Just want to thank everybody in advance for checking that out. If you went ahead and signed up for the new Great Books program, this latest round of signups, I want to thank you also. You've helped contribute to not only your own edification, but the continued support of the WCY podcast as well. At the time I'm recording this, enrollment is open for just another 12 hours, so by the time you hear this, it's closed. So if you want to know more about that, head on over to our website, click on our friends, then click on the intellectual linear progression, read great books. It's a great, amazing program. Accountability and community is really what this program is all about. It's the market differentiator, if you will. Not to mention the fact it's owned and operated by a brother. Now, as you heard in the opener of the show, I just really couldn't decide on what to bring you. It's no secret, I've been in school for this last summer semester, so I had some classes that were accelerated just to make up all the credits you can during the summer break. Because of that, I got really behind. Actually, I want to also give a really big thank you to worshipful brother Darren Laners. Darren took over for us in the interim there while I was in class for the Midnight Freemasons as managing editor. And he's done such a phenomenal job. I just want to thank him for everything that he's done because it's what kept Midnight Freemasons going. And to that end, I missed a lot of the great articles that were written. I didn't get to read them. I always get to read them before they go up, right? And I just didn't get to. And I pulled a few of those articles this week as well as some other things. And I hope you guys really enjoy. So without any further ado, let's have first, because it seems like we're really getting back to work, I want to read Freemasonry in the Age of COVID-19 by Todd E. Creason, 33rd degree. Now, first and foremost, it may be super amusing to those out there who have opened the link to this article. What you see there is Todd Creason wearing a mask with a bunch of lapel pins attached to it, with the caption, "I can't believe nobody is marketing lapel pin masks yet." Me neither, Todd. Well, he goes on. I remember as a kid, that first day of school in the fall, standing out beside the road waiting for the school bus with my brand new Trapper Keeper and my unopened box of crayons, and looking forward to seeing my friends again. Summers were long in the country, sometimes they seemed endless, and by the time fall rolled around, I was ready to go back to school. I was reminded of this the other night as I got ready to go to my first lodge meeting in 4 months. Those same kind of memories came back to me. Laughing over a meal, talking to friends out of the parking lot after the meeting had ended, the work we do together, the lessons we learn together. I get so tired of hearing the term new normal. Masonry will adapt in the short term, but I believe it will not be that much different in the long term. This too shall pass, and the essential elements of Masonry will stand for generations to come. If anything, I think this break we've had, and this period of adjustment we've had, has made us stronger. It slowed us all down. We've had more time when we're not running around doing things to appreciate life, to take stock in what's important, and to think about how we might do things differently going forward. A few weeks ago, my good friend, Brother Bill Hosler, made a good point on the Meet, Act, and Part podcast. He said we've gotten back to the essence of Masonry during this time apart, and I think he's right. I think Greg Knott and Darren Laners, who were part of the conversation, would also agree. We've gotten back to what we're all about just lately. We're checking in on our older members and widows like we should have been doing all along. We're helping each other. We've been innovative in ways we haven't been in decades. We've been creative in ways we haven't in generations. We've even found a few tools that exist that will survive a lot longer than this virus will. And the fellowship has actually been stronger in our absence from one another than it was when we were all together all the time. I've gotten more phone calls and emails from friends in the last 4 months than I probably have in the last 4 years. A few others I've spoken to have said the same thing. I hope some of this lasts once the memory of this international break in the day-to-day fades from our memory. I hope we all remember just how important Masonry became to us when suddenly it vanished from our lives in a significant way for a time. I hope we remember and appreciate how much our friends mean to us. I hope we remember how much our communities mean to us. I hope we remember what we all did to help each other get through this as brothers. It was great walking back in my lodge again last week, hearing all too familiar sounds of laughter coming from the lodge room. I've missed my fraternal family. Toddy Creason, 33rd degree. You know, I have to really agree with Todd. We've gotten back to work at my own lodge, albeit in a somewhat mixed model, and it's been really great to see people and to share in some of that fellowship again. Todd says something really interesting in his article when he says, we found a few tools that will survive a lot longer than this virus will. And he's right. We've got a whole new set of digital tools that all of a sudden we've just figured out like they were just invented, but they've been around a while. Now the fraternity has really dug in. He says we've been creative in ways that we haven't been in generations. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. This is wonderful. We've been innovative in ways we haven't been in decades. Hello? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of wonderful, but it's amazing to see what we've done when we've had to be forced to do it. And I guess my only wish is that if this teaches us anything, it's that maybe we should be a little bit more innovative in Masonry, dare I say, and not have to play catch up like this. Maybe we should be a little bit more on the forefront moving into the future. So, Brother Todd, excellent piece. Really enjoyed it. Now, the next piece I have for you this week comes also from the Midnight Freemasons, and this one you haven't read yet because it hasn't gone live. A Love of Learning Can't Be Diminished. How We Pushed On, by Midnight Freemason guest contributor Brother Joe Martinez. Another year, another Esotericon has come and gone. This one was a wee bit different than last year's, but I can tell you from first-hand experience that the energy, fellowship, discourse, and love of learning was there in enormous quantities. The 2020 Mid-Atlantic Esotericon was held in a virtual setting on July 25th, 2020. It was an all-day affair that included speakers, panelists, tarot readings, and fundraising that was truly a sight to see. As one of the hosts, I most assuredly had some takeaways from this year's experience, far different than those I thought I would have when we announced a second event way back in June of 2019. When we cleaned and packed up from the inaugural 2019 event, we all came off this euphoric high, one that helped us make an easy decision to continue with the Esotericon format for another year. We booked a venue, found a locale for a social night, called around to book a Sunday event, and rallied our endless supply of rainbow girls who truly made the 2019 event a magical experience. Feeding us, making sure everyone went to the right place, and cleaning up after 157 esoterically minded people for an entire weekend was a daunting task. and could have only been accomplished by this amazing group of young ladies. I had to throw the kudos in the beginning before I forgot to do it later. We had everything planned and booked by October of 2019, so it seemed like smooth sailing until the summer of 2020. We took the commentary and feedback from the prior year's event and incorporated those lessons learned and truly expected a fantastic in-person event here near the nation's capital. Then our friend COVID-19 showed up, disrupted families, jobs, events, and lives all over the world. To say that a global pandemic on this scale was met with unpreparedness all over the planet is an understatement. It kicked our butts, and it changed the face of our social existence for years to come. We waited as long as we could to figure out what to do. Then, conferences started canceling or postponing until a later, undetermined date. The Masonic conference schedule was already filled to the brim throughout the year, and we couldn't just move it to another date. We decided as late as possible, hoping for an 11th hour save to switch to all virtual, with the idea in our heads that this coming event would pale in comparison to the first. So we did what any other group of well-intentioned lads would do. We tried to make the best of this very weird situation and began to plan out what would become the first virtual-only Esotericon. In my head, I knew we were going to miss out on the fellowship and discourse, two things which are absolutely essential when you are speaking to people on or conversing about things like Hermeticism, the ancient mysteries, and the lost history of our gentle craft. There is something that can never be replicated by face-to-face discourse with like-minded people, all speaking about things that they like or even don't like about the topics at hand. Or so I thought. We decided, since we had more room to work with the digital landscape, to open ticket sales back up to folks who wanted to attend this new fandangled digital event. We thought that we would get a few stragglers who would not have come in person due to distance or scheduling, etc., but a small group nevertheless. How wrong we were. We ended up with 101 virtual tickets, 101 more people that came because we offered a virtual option to an initially in-person event. It was astounding. More on that later. The number grew so large that we immediately became concerned with the number of attendees. Open microphones whilst going to the bathroom with one's headset on, people yelling at their pet, kids or spouses while not on mute, that we made the late decision to switch to a webinar-style format instead of an open Zoom meeting. It was a tough decision, limiting the attendees to a text and chat and missing out on seeing everyone's lovely faces, but webinars exist for a particular reason. They exist to disseminate information to a mass of people with little turmoil and headache on the part of the conference hosts. So the day was fast approaching. The frantic shipping of goodies, last-minute schedule changes, organizing almost 250 people into something that resembled the magic of 2019 was all coming to a head. Registrations were sent, tickets were confirmed, and people were bombarded with an avalanche of emails in preparation for the event. All was, crossing fingers, ready for the big day. Then came Saturday morning. All the presenters arrived. We made intros and started with our first speaker. 5 minutes into Chuck Dunning's presentation, I knew this was going to be a great day. The chat box in Zoom was aflutter with dialogue and commentary. People were asking salient and very interesting questions. After the presentation, everyone was engaged with the presenters and hosts and moved in a similar fashion throughout the day. A long day to be sure, but presentations from Chuck Dunning, Dave Bacon, Don McAndrews, Angel Millar, Joseph Wages, and even Robert Johnson provided fascinating and well-researched presentations. The topics spanned the gamut on what people would consider quote-unquote esotericism, hermeticism, meditation, perception, and thought experiments, the missing pieces of ritual history, and the temple of man as a symbol weaved into the language of consciousness. In between each talk, the chat was alive with commentary, book suggestions, follow-up commentary, and an overall sense of mirth and enjoyment. The unlisted surprises we had in store for the attendees this year were Most Worshipful Brother Akram Elias, past Grand Master of the District of Columbia, with a brief intro about the Masonic Legacy Society, which is essentially a revival of the study of the mysteries of Freemasonry, using the lens of the craft degrees to further one's path of self-improvement. Next, we had a hello and thank you from Most Worshipful Brother Sean Bradshaw, current Grand Master of Masons in North Carolina and past Esotericon guest, who welcomed everyone and showed everyone at the event that there is hope in the craft for those who are called to lead, to still adhere to a real purpose of Freemasonry and to make it a rallying cry for Masons in their care. The other round of surprises came at the end of the day, when the then Grand Worthy Advisor, Miss Caitlin Gigi Costas, presented a thank you to all the attendees for their support, then informed us all of the charity which we helped support by donating $3,500. She told us of her and her family's personal experience with Give Kids the World Village, an amazing resort in Florida which provides vacations to critically and terminally ill children and their families. This was followed by, as far as I can tell, the first esoteric presentation related to the Rainbow Girls, the Ladies Masonic Youth Group that has assemblies all over the world. Miss Maribel Martinez presented the erudite commentary on the hidden symbolism of the rainbow, how it applies to the young ladies in the order, and how the rainbow ties to the ancient flood myths that span the centuries and the globe. At the end of a long day, just before we turned off the cameras and microphones, said our goodbyes to all our guests, and then took in the experience, I can honestly say that the mood in that group of 4 hosts was a combination of jubilation and surprise. The conference truly went spectacular. Of course, there were a couple of little technical glitches on the occasional extra break to get speakers lined up, but to say that this went well under the circumstances and time required to craft such a different event is truly an understatement. So back to my comments about my wildly different takeaways for this year's event. We had planned on taking the lessons we learned from the 2019 event and tweaking a couple of things to enhance the experience of the event. Once COVID hit, those little tweaks went right into the shred bin. My takeaways for the revamped virtual experience were as follows. People who are interested in the more esoteric, educational, or allegorical aspect of the craft are, by far and wide, some of the most adaptable and open-minded people I have had the pleasure of knowing. Being virtual, while it took away the face-to-face aspects that make this event so great, did not diminish the enthusiasm and dialogue that carried on for 10+ hours. The panelists were able to provide direct and poignant talks in environments of comfort and control, which I think made them more personal and enriching. We have learned that we can extend our reach, invite more people, and go bigger and different, won't say better, with little fear of failure. The need is present, and it must be filled. To close this little love letter to the Mid-Atlantic Esotericon, I can honestly say that this year's conference was more magical than I would have thought possible. The energy and sense of togetherness were there, even though most of us were separated by hundreds or thousands of miles. The discourse and transmission of wisdom is the primary reason why I became a Freemason, and my heart has found a place where I can truly experience it. I can only count the days to June 11th, 12th, and 13th, 2021, when we mount up and give this another whirl. Joe Martinez. I really couldn't say it any better. I think Joe, as one of the 4 hosts of the conference, really has given us some really interesting things to think about, really talking a lot about the tools that seem to tie into what Brother Toddy Creason talked about a little bit toward the end of his piece. You know, these newly discovered tools that won't go away anytime soon. I think this addition of a digital component, a virtual component, is going to be something that is revolutionary in Freemasonry, specifically when we're talking about conferences, these meetings. So it's really exciting. And Brother Joe Martinez nailed it. Of course, all thanks in the world not only goes out to Joe, but to Brother Kevin Holman, to Brother John Ruark, and Brother Jason Richards, who came together and put this thing on. The four horsemen of the education. Here we are. I guess I better start making my paper chain to count down the days to Esotericon 2021. All right, so that all being said, I wanted to touch on a couple other things here. A few episodes back, I talked a little bit about getting the questions and answers as it applied to areas of Masonic education. And what I was looking for were the past issues of the Enlightener of Masonic magazine here in Illinois from 1953, April. There were 238 answers. I guess they were reported in February of 1954 were all of the replies. And I was really trying to find this February 1954 edition of the Enlightener magazine, and I haven't been able to find it anywhere. So here's a call out to anybody out there. If you know of the Illinois Enlightener, or the Enlightener as it may have been called, February 1954, let me know, snap some pictures of it, send them to the email wcypodcast@gmail.com, because I'd really like to read that and break it all down to see what we can figure out about what people thought about Masonic education and the concepts there, contained back in 1954. I'm also looking to get the results of the Masonic Congress, which was back in 1890. So if you have any information on that, please also forward that on. One of the great things about having a podcast is the ability from time to time to be able to ask people for a little bit of help, crowdsource some Masonic education. So that's what I'm hoping to do here and cross these things off my list. They've been on my to-do list for 3 or 4 months now, and I want them off my list, but I can't get them off my list until we do it. So if you know anything about that, I'll continue my search. If you can help out, that'd be great, you guys. I really appreciate it. Again, any information you can send on over to wcypodcast@gmail.com. Now, for the next paper that I have for you guys, well, it has to do with social media. Now, I know in the past we've talked a lot about social media and its impact on Freemasonry. Some people think it has an amazing impact. Some people think it has a bad influence. But I think overall, my own personal opinion is that it's a mixed bag. But somebody who recently wrote about this was Brother Robert E. Jackson on, of course, the Midnight Freemasons. So let's go ahead and see what Rob Jackson has to say about the antisocial impact of social media. I was done. I had to quit for my own mental stability, whatever was left. I just couldn't participate in the world of social media any longer. I've heard of others quitting and removing themselves from the vitriol, but for so long I found humor and camaraderie in social media that brought me closer to my friends, past and present. However, within the dumpster fire of 2020, the good no longer outweighed the bad. In order to maintain a connection, I had to disconnect. As I've written about before, I've been struggling with depression for years, most likely the vast majority of my life. The brotherhood I found in Masonry helped with a great deal of those struggles. Finding like-minded men socially interacting and learning to accept our differences with unconditional love. Oftentimes, trying to understand these differences, the intent of their actions, causes doubts in our own personal evaluations. The brotherly charity we exercise usually provides a bidirectional love and understanding, but in the world of social media, sometimes even among brothers, that charity seems to fade. I started realizing that the more I saw on social media, the more upset I became. There was no opportunity for discussion or understanding. As the articles and posts arose, I found myself researching and trying to understand the motivation, the intent. The urge to understand each side became almost an obsession, and eventually every post, every article, I found to be offensive and hurtful. I'm putting this out there because I found it hard to believe that I'm the only one that feels this, that struggles with the understanding. With the perception of offense and hurt, I started wondering if I was just too weak, too sensitive. My own personal value dropped, further impacting my already low self-esteem. I knew that no matter what I wrote, no matter how I countered, it wouldn't matter. I wasn't going to change anybody's mind. Neither did I feel like I had the right to try. Don't get me wrong, there is a clear, positive side of social media. You are able to keep in contact with past and current friends. You can learn through incredible online lectures and presentations to entertain and educate, especially now when our ability to interact in person has been so stifled. Our dependency on social media has skyrocketed. Unfortunately, the common issue of quote-unquote fear of missing out, sometimes referred to as FOMO, F-O-M-O, grows with that increased dependency on electronic socializing, even to the point where we hear about lectures and presentations after the fact. There's a sadness in not being able to attend, or worse, not being invited. This fear of missing out, fear of exclusion, has driven mankind to horrible actions in the past. Is it possible to wholeheartedly believe that the world you see is curated and what you're seeing isn't real? Or do those images settle within the recesses of the brain, always making you wonder if you've made a wrong decision, or just aren't worthy, almost as if you're an outsider, unable to gain access to the inner circle of life without the proper password? That inner circle, however, is filled with little more than perception and imagination. These fabrications of the mind germinate and fertilize our pain, thereby feeding the FOMO. There is another fear within the realm of social media, seemingly much more rare than FOMO, and that's the fear of rejection. Fear that whatever you post, whether serious or intended for humor, will offend or hurt somebody. At best, they will appreciate the humor and laugh with you. Others may keep their feelings to themselves. At worst, the judge and jury of social media commit you to death. Before you know it, you've been labeled with one of the many labels we seem to inflict on ourselves and those around us. For many, it appears that they can compartmentalize these rebuttals and shrug them off. To me, it's a horrible feeling of rejection, denial, and suppression of thought. When I see these attacks happening among brothers, friends, acquaintances, the pain becomes personal regardless of my involvement in the quote-unquote conversation. The engineer in me must identify the source that drives these attacks. Is there an anger embedded so deep within humanity that continues to grow unchecked? Or perhaps the problem is solely within myself being quote-unquote too soft, allowing the worst of humanity to penetrate my own sanctum sanctorum, and discounting the good in the world. It just appears to me that an increasing number of people want the anger, the fighting, and the best way to conquer a people is to divide them. This belief brings about a level of contempt for the attacker and likely my current disdain for quote-unquote news and now social media. It seems like in these areas all we see are the attacks and wrongdoings of the others. The contempt that grows within myself, however, doesn't eradicate the need to understand the motivations and the intent of the attacker. My heart, however, lies with those being attacked. Even if I disagree with their position, I feel they deserve to be heard, and as humans we should work to understand. The communication and charity, true tolerance, must happen if we are going to dampen the anger. However, in the world of COVID-19, loss of freedoms, and severe racial disputes, it feels completely hopeless. The rage and hatred, regardless of where people lie on the political spectrum, feels like a poison spreading through our society. The problem is legislation, social distancing, and required face coverings appear to spread the poison rather than curtail it. When I discuss, with an effort to understand and perhaps appear to defend those attacks, I feel the hatred and anger directed to me. What have I done? I just want them to see the other side, try to understand where people are coming from. But now I've hurt the very people I care about. What I want, my desires, and through my actions, have now caused more pain. And I do hope that we can all agree that this world needs less pain. What consistently eludes us all is the path to get there. I firmly believe that path is hidden within our rituals, within the lessons of Freemasonry, a path that has been laid out by some of the greatest thinkers of humanity. However, only those that seek the path will ever find it. Even upon search, it is possible that we'll become lost within our own thoughts. I truly fear this cycle of pain will continue, progressively getting worse, until the very foundation of humanity, true charity, crumbles to dust. My brothers, my friends, I need help. We all need help. How do we arrange the harmony within this chaos? How do we uncover the benevolence in the face of anger? Can we even right this ship? Or shall we simply release the tiller, embrace the suffering, and allow the wind to carry us to that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns? Robert Edward Jackson. Well, there you have a piece that doesn't end so happy, right? But I've seen these kind of arguments happen along the way in social media. And I think there's a couple things to take away from this. And that is, yep, we are very polarized, but we oftentimes aren't listening. Simply by asking somebody to understand somebody else's stance comes across as that you must also understand and feel the same way as the person arguing, when many times these people, like Robert, are there to try to mediate both sides and to dig around to find commonalities or perhaps some sort of piece of information that is misconstrued by one side or the other. I've been there myself, that's for sure. Social media in 2020 has much been relegated to Masonic education and, of course, the thing that gets us all through the day, memes. And it's if you're not posting memes or part of an education thing, I'm not really sure what's going on in Facebook world these days. So, I just try to post positive things, funny quips, funny joke articles from The Onion, memes, and of course, I do a little photography, so every once in a while something like that will get shared. But it's just such a polarizing time, and I guess it's a letter to us all, right? Whatever side we're on, let's remember that when we ask questions like, tell me more about this, or when we're digging to find the reasons somebody posts something that may be hurtful, that we dig in a little bit and we find out what those things are respectfully, but also to the people who are attempting to understand. Let's all agree right now that attempting to understand doesn't equate it to taking that side. It's attempting to understand, and that's really all that is. So we need to come at this, as Robert says, and I'm absolutely positive that there's definitely lessons within Freemasonry's degrees that we can apply in a practical way to how we work within social media. Now, the last piece I have for you this week is really kind of cool because right after I finished reading the piece in last week's episode, which was Labyrinth into the Occult Mind, episode 456, that same day I received an email from the Philosophical Society, which is the Masonic Philosophical Society, which shared an article about labyrinths that was published on May 4th, 2020 by Pamela McDowne. And Pamela has written quite a bit on Freemasonry over the years and has some really great blog posts. And so this email comes through and bam, right there, the labyrinth at Shards. Why are sacred places important? It's almost as if they knew the article that had just arrived in most people's mailboxes who subscribe to the Knight Templar magazine. So, let's read this great piece. The Labyrinth at Shards. Why are sacred places important? In our present time, there seems to be a huge market for buying your way to enlightenment. Everyone is peddling a secret. Chant this mantra, hold this crystal, buy some incense, rub that oil, say these words, go to this retreat, some of these things may have some value. Spiritual longing is a real part of the human experience. Labyrinths hold a special attraction for me. Can a labyrinth really be a tool for enlightenment? Are sacred places important? The first labyrinth that I ever experienced was the Shards Labyrinth, although I was not lucky enough to be in at the famous labyrinth in Shards, France. I liked it so much I began to investigate labyrinths in general, and the Shards Labyrinth in particular. Shards Cathedral was built 1,000 years ago to be the site of a mystery school. Not only was the cathedral an architectural feat, but was one of the leading learning centers at the time. The edifice combined with the visionary teachings of Plato with Christian mysticism. You must walk the entire labyrinth path before gaining entrance to the temple. It is the quote-unquote way in, if you will, a chamber of reflection of sorts. Those who have been to the actual site in France say that the effect of the cathedral is peaceful and nurturing. You are at rest, left to wander or to meditate in tranquility. The atmosphere suggests that the veil between the human and celestial worlds is thin, and God is very near. It represents the ideal of a sacred space, a blending of the divine and material. The impact of Shards on people at the time must have been enormous. How can a place be so heavenly? Sacred geometry. The divine mystery of the labyrinth walk might be due in part to the magical pattern. One path leads inward to the center, and the same path leads back out again. Shards has an 11-circuit design divided into 4 quadrants. They are encircled by an outer ring of lunations, thought to represent a type of lunar calendar. The quadrants suggest the even-armed cross. At the center is a rosette pattern of 6 petals, which is the place of rest. It reminds us of the sacred lotus, symbol of enlightenment. In medieval times, the path was considered a substitute for a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. It is symbolic of the pilgrim's journey into his soul, the center. It must be a two-way journey which ends at the starting point. The pilgrim must not seek to remain inside. He goes and comes back. He visits. He walks from the unreal to the real, from the periphery to the center, from the mundane to the spiritual and back. Is this not life? Symmetry of design. In his book, The Mysteries of Shards Cathedral, Louis Charpentier recalls his first experience of being inside the cathedral. He was immediately struck with the impression that quote-unquote everything contained its opposite in itself. He said that the same balance contained in the secret of the Chinese Tai Chi is at work in the Shards, where the proportions, orientation, position, and symbolism have all been designed to alert the psyche and refresh the spirit. This idea is hinted at in Chapter 14 of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "What we look for beyond seeing, and call the unseen, listen for beyond hearing, and call the unheard, grasp for beyond reaching, and call the withheld, merge beyond understanding in a oneness, which does not merely rise and give light, does not merely set and leave darkness, but forever sends forth a succession of living things as mysterious as the begotten existence to which they return." End quote. Charpentier further states, quote, "If the pilgrim experienced the entire sensations of the cathedral, it would be because the body's senses had apprehended all the musical and geometrical proportions, and all the numbers and lines expressed in the building's interior." End quote. Geometric forms that exist in the labyrinth or even the Masonic temples, such as the cube, triangle, sphere, square, or oblong square, could act as a doorway into various states of awareness. God geometricizes. Sacred temples can be said to stand for an unseen condition of something that can be known, beauty, as an expression of truth. Divine archetypes are said to be not only doorways to the unknown, but as Plato has indicated, they are the very essence of beauty. The nature of beauty cannot always be described in words, and so It is possible that certain symbols act as a bridge between the visible and invisible. Satisfying a physical and metaphysical need, sacred architecture can 1. Provide an energetic focusing center on the physical plane wherein the mysteries are learned and enacted. 2. Serve those seekers who enter the building and become intellectually and spiritually stimulated. The more beautiful the appearance in form, the more closely it will correspond with spiritual truth. Buckminster Fuller stated it like this, quote, "When I am working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it is wrong." End quote. My sense is that if a person does not appreciate beautiful or holy things, he will lose them. Without reverence, the sacred feeling will diminish, and then be forgotten. Thereafter, his only concern will be his personal comfort and selfish desires. On the other hand, as we honor holy places, we will be entrusted with holy things. Just the opposite of disbelief and despair. The goal is eternal life and peace. Contemplating art and architecture, the spiritual and the divine, moves us away from the mundane world of the daily round. Do sacred spaces make us more enlightened? Some have scoffed at labyrinths, Masonic temples, mantra, and things like crystals or incense for centuries. In times of need, I have tried all of them. And that, of course, comes from the Masonic Philosophical Society, recapturing the spirit of the Renaissance. The article was written May 4th by Pamela McDowne, and you can read more of her work at philosophicalsociety.org. Now, if you go to the website, I've talked about them before, and you can join. I would highly recommend checking out this website and get on their email list as well. They really do have a wealth, you guys, of great information. So again, philosophicalsociety.org. That's going to do it for us this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, kind of a catch-up episode on some of the articles written on Midnight Freemasons, and a follow-up here on the Labyrinth. With that in mind, I want to thank our fellows, our producers, our contributors once more. But that's it, you guys. Hope you have a wonderful week coming up. Stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.